Let us now look at Lady Macbeth's torment. We said in the beginning that she was seen as a fiend like queen, and many people still see her as a fiend like devilish creature. And then the second part of Malcolm's quote here, by self and violent hands took off her life. Now, what happened in the latter part of the play um, to actually get her to kill herself? Let us look at a few of these pointers. We've looked at the coronation, we've seen her not being happy, and we've seen the rift between her and her husband starting to develop. So, what we see after the coronation and the subsequent events, for instance, the killing of Banquo and so forth, and the series of murders that Macbeth starts to commission, and where he does not include her. Remember, she's not included in those murders. She is not even told about them. So we see a woman tormented by guilt later on in the play, rather than someone who is truly evil. She did not actually kill the king, but with the witches was one of the prime instigators. She did not have the courage to perform the deed herself, but she relied on deception and manipulation to get her way. Now, it's up to you to decide how evil this is. To her, the murder was merely an expedient way to get to the throne, the quickest way. And she felt that she was aided by fate and superstition, that it was meant to be, to achieve her ambitious dream of being queen, and for placing her beloved husband, and equally ambitious husband, on the throne. Think about that. What she did not foresee is that the act of regicide would not be enough. It wouldn't be enough for them just to kill the king, and it will be the end all, the be all and the end all. But that Macbeth would have to proceed on a bloody path that now to her is unimaginable to face in reality. In other words, the things that he does after killing the king. In other words, the ordering of Banquo and Fleance's death, the killing of Macduff, and also there are rumors of many, many, many other murders that took place. She only heard about them later on. She never experienced it. She wasn't part of it. She was just at home, not being part of his life, while he went on his killing spree. And she did not ever foresee that that might be necessary, right? And then, of course, she moves into this murky world of semi-consciousness. She hears these rumors about all the cruel deaths, and she hears, and she doesn't know what to make of it. She goes into this murky place, which to her is hell. To her, the simple solution, she thought it would be a simple solution. All they needed to do is kill the king, wash their hands, wash off the blood from their hands, and they would be cleared of the deed. But now she moves into a state of madness. And she dubs her hands. In other words, she now gets guilt-ridden, and she dubs her hands. She cannot get the blood or the smell of the blood or the color of the blood from her hands, although, of course, they are clean. But she feels guilty, and she bemoans the ever-present smell of blood on her hands. So this is Lady Macbeth, preoccupied with the blood on her hands. And remember, she was only part of the first murder. However, despite the fact that she feels so guilty, because remember, she also feels the guilt of Macbeth's other murders. She does not fully understand the moral issues surrounding the murders. She just feels confused. Then, of course, we must understand that she, during the time of planning the murder and so forth, she simply misunderstood the effect of guilt on her conscience. She never realized that this was going to happen. She thought she was going to be queen, I'm going to be happy, and then she becomes queen, and she's not happy. And she misunderstood the fact that she would be affected by the guilt. And unlike Macbeth, who had foreseen the consequences, Macbeth knew full well that before he even did what he did in any of the instances, that the moral consequences would be very dire. But she, unlike Macbeth, had not foreseen the devastating effect of flirting with evil. She doesn't understand those concepts to attain her personal desires. We looked at that in the lesson on the tragic hero and on the moral issues in the book. Like Macbeth, however, she now suffers the result of it. She feels loveless. She lives a life of lovelessness. Her husband is more and more distant. He once called her his dearest partner and his love. He's otherwise involved. And he doesn't have time for her craziness, her madness, and her sleepwalking, which is also starting. And he hires a doctor and a gentle lady to be at his side constantly and to look after her. And he wants the doctor to cure her of this madness. But later on, of course, we realize, and the doctor himself realizes, that it's beyond his scope to cure her of this madness. She needs not even a psychiatrist or a doctor. She needs somebody holy. She needs religious help more than anything else. Because what she's lacking is the moral conscience, the moral feeling of this is what I did wrong, and therefore I am suffering this, and I have to repent or something. And that's something that you do while you are conscious, not while you're in a semi-conscious state, in a murky state. Macbeth at this stage refers to her as the doctor's patient. Look after the patient, not my wife. And her presence seems irritating to him, especially later on when they're already in Dunsinane, in the castle at Dunsinane with a fortress, and she is sort of confined there. And as I say, without anybody around except for the doctor and the gentle lady to look after her. His calloused reaction to his suicide, when he hears that she has died, in other words, she has killed herself, he just hears that she has died, and he says she should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such news. And that suggests to us how far they have driven apart. The only person she really knows there or intimately is her husband, but he's drifted away and he's busy with looking at what's going on and the forces coming to the castle. It's Birnam Wood moving up to Dunsinane, and he's worried about the forces coming for him, and he doesn't have time to mourn her death. He doesn't have time for the death itself. He finds it an irritation, right? He's in the middle of this foolhardy, ridiculous attempt to save his name, his dignity, and his honor. At this point, remember, she is still childless. Like Macbeth, she is not surrounded by friends. She's lonely, only by the concerned doctor and the gentlewoman in waiting. And both these express the sentiment that they do not envy her position at all. Thank goodness we are not this miserable queen. So they both say that she is unenviable in her misery and in her torment. And then earlier, Lady Macbeth said that thoughts, now look, here's a lot of irony here, that thoughts about the murder would make them mad. So don't think about this because if you do, it's going to make us crazy. But ironically, she is now crazy and she cannot think morally. She's semi-conscious. She's in a murky state. Her semi-conscious mad existence is ironically devoid of moral thoughts. So it's not because she is thinking that she is mad. She's mad because she cannot think, right? She cannot think about these things. She has only scraps of memories, all of which fill her with guilt. Bits and pieces of what she's heard about all the murders and what happened. And she cannot work through it. She cannot use her reason to work through it. And all of which fill her with guilt, of course, but not with remorse or repentance, because it's just scraps of thoughts. She says hell is murky, and she means that her murky mind resembles hell. So this poor lady is in a state of hell in Dunsinane Castle, close to the end of her life. She seems unable to embrace concepts such as faith, love, and hope. You know, the theological virtues we've talked about. She cannot understand it. She's never had any understanding of it. And now she's just hovering in a semi-state of consciousness. Here is an example of how her mind works. She says, the Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? She's obviously referring to Lady Macduff, that Macbeth had killed very brutally with all her children and all her servants, the whole castle of Macduff that got slaughtered. And she has heard about it, and all she can say is, the Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? Oh, right? And then she goes on to say, what? Will these hands never be clean? That, of course, refers to the murder of Duncan. No more of that, my lord, no more of that. You mar all this with your starting. In other words, stop this, as she refers to this, the night of the murder, when every little sound sort of upset him and he was startled by it. Here's the smell of blood still. And then, of course, she looks at her hand and she smells the blood. And then she says, and it echoes what Macbeth said before, that even if you use the entire ocean will not be able to wash his hands clean. But he refers to a moral kind of guilt. Here she just says, all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh, oh, oh. So we can see her troubled state of mind as she is walking around in the castle in sleepwalking. And then, of course, what the doctor says to that is, unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their deaf pillows will discharge their secrets. Of course, this is how they get to know that she actually knew about all those murders, that she had got to know about it. But that is the last we actually see of Lady Macbeth, a sleepwalking person, filled with grief and filled with guilt and not knowing what is going on around her. And the doctor says, you see, her eyes are open. And the gentle lady says, aye, but their senses are shut. The lights are on, but there's nobody home, right? And the doctor says, what is it she does now? Look how she rubs her hands. So you can see she constantly rubs her hands. She will never be rid of the guilt of killing the king. And she says, out, damn spot, out, I say. And we are left with the question whether it's perhaps too one sided an opinion just to say that she was this evil person. How evil was she really? Was she just ignorant? What do you make of the character of Lady Macbeth? Do you have any pity for her, who actually took her by herself and violent hands sort of took her own life and ended it all because she couldn't face it any longer?